Hey y'all, my name is Novella and I am the host of Bootstrap Journey. Thank you so much for joining me today in this video. Today I'm going to talk about self-worth. It is something that I have struggled with for years. As you may already know, my mother was an addict with borderline personality disorder, and she caused a tremendous amount of damage through emotional, physical, spiritual abuse. And one of the things that she really drilled into my head was that I wasn't good enough. And part of that come from some of the things that she said, like when she told me that I wouldn't even be alive if it weren't for her being against abortion. Essentially, she was telling me that she wanted to have an abortion, but she had morals, so she was stuck with me. And she was in and out of my life for years. She would just drop me off at my grandparents and disappear for months or years at a time. And so I developed this belief that I had to earn love, and I had to prove to her that I was good enough to be loved by her. And that settled into my subconscious so that I started feeling that way towards other people, including God. I started feeling that way towards God as well over time. But I often would try to prove to people that I deserved to be loved, that I'm special, that I deserved support and nurture and all of the things that you really can't earn from another human being or from God. You get them because that person genuinely cares. And that's the only way to gain them. And it has nothing to do with your worth or your value. It has to do with that person, the other side of that interaction. I also had to learn the hard way that I had support and love from other people. Other people saw my value for years, and I could not receive it or accept it from them because I was so desperately trying to receive it and pursue it through my mother. For the longest time, I thought that if I was good enough, then she would stay. If I was a good enough child, if I was worthy of her love and attention, then she would stay and not leave. So I've been working on this underlying belief, this subconscious belief, for years. I've worked on it through talk therapy, through EMDR, which is desensitized eye movements. I've tried hypnotherapy. I've tried EFT, emotional freedom techniques, which is tapping. And that helps process things from one side of the brain, like your feeling side of the brain, over into the logical side of your brain so that you can um, reset that belief. I've absolutely hit it with prayer, fasting. Um, I think it's just a process. This particular thing for me, not saying for anyone else, but for me, it's just something that I have to work through with God and the Holy Spirit on a regular basis. And now, where I'm at, I'm able to recognize it a lot more quickly when I am triggered, when I am in those spaces where I start to feel like I'm not good enough. Because when I start to feel that way, I start to scramble and I start to desperately try to um, gain the approval of other people. And I start feeling like a failure and like I'm not good enough. And it's not just in one realm of my life, it starts to affect every aspect of my life, and it sends me into a spiral. But like I said, I'm at a space now where I'm starting to recognize that and be able to gain control before I spiral out way too far. I noticed that it's really, I'm more vulnerable to it whenever I'm under a lot of stress, if I'm overwhelmed already, and if I'm hormonal. Sorry, fellas, had to bring that one up. Then I tend to sink into that space again. Now, what occurred to me recently is that we often rely on the input of the environments that we are in, And it's natural. It's a natural human inclination for us to desire the approval and support of those who are around us. We were created for connection. So it's natural for us to want the people who are around us to approve of us, to care about us, to respect us. We want to feel special to those people. That's natural. But it becomes a very unhealthy dynamic if certain elements are coming into play that distort things and cause you to start trying to control people, or if you're trying to manipulate people, or if you feel desperate. You feel like you desperately have to earn the love and affection and attention of that person. That's not healthy. It's not good. And if you notice that you are in those spaces, start becoming more self aware and kind of step back, take some deep breaths, maybe write it out if you're good at writing, because that's my cathartic process is writing. So a lot of times when I write things out, I can see the bigger picture and I can see a fuller perspective. And that's also what I love about talk therapy is it gives me an unbiased third party opinion who can see the situation without that attachment element. So she's able to give me feedback that makes perfect sense, but I wasn't able to see the trees for the forest, if that makes sense. So back to my point, um, we build these small communities around us. Like we have, uh, let me use this as an example. So this is the world, the earth, right? And it's filled with billions of people. So we can't take in everything. We can't be all inclusive of everyone in the entire world. No one can. No one can take that on except for God. No human can take that on. It would overwhelm us. It would probably break us. But through the internet and social media platforms, we now have access to a plethora of people's opinions, their hurts, their mindsets, their beliefs, their offenses, and this can crowd out what the truth is. Now, so we go from billions of people, whole earth here, to let's condense it down to our personal individual lives, right? So we build these communities around us. You have the people you work with, that's a grouping. You have people you go to church with, that's a grouping. You have your friends, your family, and those may intertwine. Um, People at Walmart, we're not even going to go there. Um, excuse me. So you get these bubbles, these pockets of people, and you interact with those people differently, right? I interact with my work group different than I interact with my family. And that's normal, that's natural to a degree. Like, I'm not saying be a chameleon or wear a mask, but there's more relaxation with my family or my friends as opposed to work, right? I have to be a little more diplomatic. I'm not the best at that, but I'm work in progress here. So anywhere we spend a significant amount of time with a group of people who gets to know us on a very personal level, we build relationships that affect each one of us differently, right? So I've always been the type to fiercely stand against injustice. And I can be brutally honest, which gets me in trouble sometimes. And I firmly believe in authenticity. So in my personal, intimate relationships, those who are closest to me, I absolutely have to have raw honesty and authenticity. If those elements aren't there, I can't trust that person enough to have that really interpersonal relationship with them. Now, I haven't always been in this space. I haven't always been like this. I had to learn how to love myself through the healing process and to reach a point where I was comfortable enough with me to say the heck with what anyone else wants, or what they choose. If they want to not be in my life because of who I am, then they weren't meant to be there. Because if I'm pretending to be someone I'm not in order to gain the affection and love of someone else, I'm miserable, and they are now loving and being tendered towards something that's not even real. It doesn't exist. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I really had to learn a hard lesson there. And again, it came through me learning to love myself and accept who I am. And as I learned to accept who I am, it didn't matter who else did not accept me. Of course, rejection still hurts, but I believe that now I draw the right people to me because I'm comfortable with who I am. And that's also how I'm able to set boundaries. That's how I'm able to protect myself and have healthier dynamics, because I'm being real and authentic. And if you're not, then I don't think we need to rock in the same spaces. Now, over time, as I became more comfortable in my own skin, I started building these amazing relationships that valued and respected me. And the tricky part is that the world is filled with toxic and emotionally unhealthy people. We're always going to have that, right? And the sad part is that the vast majority of people have not done the healing work, and most people have experienced some sort of hurt that they needed to work through, they needed to process through, whether it was real or imagined, perceived hurt. We still have to process through those things, otherwise, we end up bitter and resentful, and that causes a whole new world of issues. Now, a lot of people have no desire for personal growth, they don't want to do the work. And that just is what it is. That's just where we're at, right? You can't do anything about it. You can't force someone to change. Some people will try, but you legitimately can't force anyone to change. They have to desire that change. And they're content with all of their little nasties. So the internet made the world a much, much smaller place, right? Because remember, whole earth. And forgive my little stand here. Whole earth. All of these people are now, we have access to their lives. And I don't know about you, but often I have to shut that out because it becomes way too overwhelming to hear all of the political pieces and the negativity and the distortions of truth. And it just feels like the darkness is pressing in. These dark clouds are just saturating my world when I'm allowing the whole world in. So I have to set a boundary there by only allowing a certain amount of information into my space. And that information has to come from very specific outlets, if that makes sense. So here's the thing. Our little circles that we built, remember we talked about that earlier, they're condensed down versions of this bigger world. And in our personal life, we're much more selective of who has access to us. And we can't really dictate who is around us that much at church or at work or at Walmart. But we still have engagement and interactions in those spaces. Like, that's an element of our lives that we just can't get beyond. Yeah, there are some people who are absolute hermits. That's not healthy either. But these things color our point of view and they shift our perspectives. So my point to all of this is that when we are upset, emotional, or just in a negative space, we tend to lose sight of those amazing connections we have built. Lately, I have felt like such a failure in every area of my life, personal, work, ministry. I've just felt like I was not good enough, and I was very critical of myself. And because I was critical of myself, I started seeing the other interactions in my life as negative, and I was taking on a perspective that they were insulting and criticizing me as well. But truly, it was just my own lens that I had up at that moment. And then I started feeling like everybody was judging me, they were rejecting me, they were disapproving of me, and just everything was falling apart. Everything. And it just sent me into a downward spiral. And I kind of stayed stuck there for more than a week. It's been probably almost a month now. And I was hurting so much over these misconstrued perceptions. And someone who works with me, and she's worked with me for a long time, she wrote a glowing review about me on LinkedIn, because I'm trying to like beef up my LinkedIn for career purposes. And it wasn't one of those where I thought, man, she laying it on thick. It didn't feel fake or sticky or anything like that. It felt really genuine, and it touched me so deeply. And that same night, I was watching one of my absolute favorite shows, which is Law and Order SVU. Don't judge me. And I noticed how people gravitate towards Olivia Benson, and they are loyal to her to a fault because of who she is. Like, they will go to bat for her. Two different DAs had to give up their career because they went too far in their pursuit of protecting her or defending, bringing justice for her. And I started thinking about that, and I was like, wow, all of these people, they are intensely for her, and yet she still encounters some really horrific things. And that's when it kind of clicked in my head that all of these voices and opinions and ideologies that we are consistently bombarded with, they don't make up our world, our individual unique worlds. They make up the world. Our individual worlds are condensed down into these personal circles that I spoke about before. And sometimes everyone in those circles is struggling, having a hard time in life. And we kind of just bounce off of each other, right? Because normally in those circles, like if I'm having a hard time, then my bestie, who is not having quite so much of a hard time, she can lift me up and support me and strengthen me. And then I can do vice versa for her. Or my cousin that I'm really close to, I can lift her up when she's in a dark space, and she does the same for me, and vice versa. So, but if we're all struggling, we're all overwhelmed, we're all scrambling to find that balance that we need, then we're just bouncing off of each other, and we aren't able to build one another up, support one another in a way that brings that stability and balance. And because we're missing each other, and maybe we're so focused in digging ourselves out of these holes that we forget to check on each other. So it feels very painful, very uncomfortable during those times when your most personal circles aren't able to be there for you, and you aren't able to be there for them. And you may have a lot of unhealthy, toxic people in your work environment or even at church, because guess what, peeps? Church, being a Christian, does not mean that we're perfect. When we give our lives to Jesus Christ, we are not suddenly a perfect ethereal being that's no longer human. We are still fallible creatures. And our personal relationship to God is what changes us. And that takes time. Just like building a personal relationship with a human being takes time, it does with God as well. So as we're building that relationship, we're getting to know Him, we're becoming closer to Him, more intimate with Him, He changes us. In Isaiah, it talks about an angel coming to Isaiah and taking a burning hot coal and pressing it to his lips. And Isaiah said, "It did not burn me." And I believe that is how our relationship with God is. Because in the Old Testament, there were several parts of the tabernacle. And only a priest could go in to the Holy of Holies, which was the presence of God, and he would have to wear a belt around his waist, a rope that had bells on it. And then that rope would go out into the outer rooms of the tabernacle, and someone else would be holding that rope as he went in. And he had repented before he went before God. He had cleansed himself, did the sacrifice for his sins before he entered into the Holy of Holies. But if there was something he failed to repent of, if there was some sin left on him, when he went into the presence of God, he would die. Not because God killed him or struck him down, but because God's presence is so pure and holy that the weight of sin is crushed under it. It cannot exist in that perfect holiness until it's covered by the blood of Christ. So, our relationship with God is burning away the things of our flesh, the desires of our flesh, and the sin that holds us captive as we grow closer to Him. But it's not burning us. It's simply changing us to be holy as He is. That's my little, that was free. You got that one for free. All right. So, but we're not perfect. We still make mistakes. The church is comprised of human people, fallible creatures who consistently make mistakes. And some people in the church are not pursuing a personal relationship with God. Some people in the church are very much in their flesh and very prideful, and they are toxic people. There's a lot of emotionally unhealthy, emotionally immature people in the church. That doesn't mean that God is still not God. That doesn't change the fact that He's sovereign and that He loves us. So just want to throw that out there. But we all still have our mess. Nevertheless, we might experience hurt and offense, frustration, all at church, as much as we do at work or in our own families or friends. We're human. We're going to hurt each other. Sometimes intentional, sometimes unintentional. I try my best to never hurt anyone intentional. For the past 15 years, I've been very, very intentional. Especially, I have a really bad temper. And when I get angry, I'm very, very intentional about my words. I will hold back because I don't want to hurt people anymore. Now, understand that you're going to have a bad egg in your group every now and then, whether it's your work group, your personal group, your family. There's some bad eggs there, right? You got some rotten stankins. But that doesn't comprise your whole group. That doesn't speak for your whole group. And it also does not show the full range of how people feel about you. One person's negative perspective of you, that doesn't account for everybody else who has encountered you. And there are people who love you deeply. They adore you. They cherish you. They just can't be singing your praises every moment of every day, much like you aren't rolling out the red carpet for everyone in your path. It's not sustainable. Love, respect, and adoration may not come through as much as we want it to or as loud as we want it, but it's there. And it's easy to allow a couple of bad people or bad situations, bad days, to lead you to believe that the whole world is against you, because that's where you're putting your focus, right? But remember those times that you felt loved and appreciated, those times of joy. Whatever is true whatever is pure, whatever is trustworthy, whatever is praiseworthy. The Bible tells us to think on these things. The Bible tells us to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And I said that recently, and I'm saying it again because we are letting our thoughts take us captive rather than us taking them captive. So if you're noticing that you're starting to get in that woe is me mindset, or everybody hates me, nobody loves me, I'm going to go eat worms. Remember that song? We've got to think on these pure things, these whatever's true, whatever's trustworthy. And once you remember those times of love, those times of support and joy, and those beautiful connections that you do have, it changes your perspective about the rest of your day and the rest of your spaces. It really does. So when you're having a hard time at work, or you're feeling like you're not being respected or appreciated, remember, think on, dwell on, meditate on these times that you were, right? I keep a journal of God's voice so that during those times when it feels like He's being completely silent, and I start asking myself, is He even real? Did I ever actually hear Him? I can go back and look at very specific things that absolutely were God's voice, and things that came to pass, and all of that remind me, yeah, He's here. You know, our feelings are not facts. If you are having conflict in your family, friction with your friends, distance from those that you care about most, don't allow the negativity to condense down in such a way that it gives you tunnel vision. Remember who you truly are, who you were created to be, and who these people in your circles, who they are to you. There's a reason why you let them into your space, right? So straighten your crown, cry if you have to, but get up off the bathroom floor. And remember, be kind to you. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share.